It's not about giving up. It's about giving back. Giving back to life what was never ours anyway, because we can't control anything in reality. We might think we can, but we can't.
Hello there, welcome to the Bardo podcast. Today's episode is with Buddhist teacher, author, and meditation instructor Tsering Paldron. We talk about anxiety, letting go, identity, burnout, activism, compassion, and what actually matters in life. My name's Marc Salmon. I'm a comedian and a practicing Buddhist who needs a lot to practice. Also spent much of my working life in adult social care. And this is a podcast about comedy, philosophy, spirituality, and trying to make sense of things in these confusing and ridiculous times. Tsering Paldron has spent decades studying and teaching Buddhist philosophy. She undertook the traditional 3-year retreat. And in this episode, we discuss the difference between empathy and compassion. We also discuss why we cling to things that make us suffer, how anxiety arises, how our minds often create stories that have very little to do with reality. It's a very gentle and practical podcast. I think you're going to love it. So let's sit back, relax, and float downstream as we enter the Bardo. Thank you for joining me, Tsering.
It's a pleasure.
It's lovely to have you here, and thank you to Bodhicharya UK Centre who are housing us, and a friend of the podcast, Cesare Sagato, who helped facilitate that. So I want to start off by, I've got a question, which is that I was thinking about this week that my life on paper looks quite good. I've got a nice job, I get to do comedy, I get to talk to interesting people. But about 3 times a week, I have a little breakdown, and I'll be like in the shower crying, eating a yogurt basically with a fork. And I wonder if we could speak a little bit about many people feel quite mentally overwhelmed right now.
Mm-hmm.
And even if their lives look okay on paper, why do you think that is? What's going on?
Well, there can be many things,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of upheaval in the world, and we're not really truly separated one from the other. So, when you go through times like this, it's normal that everybody feels the repercussion of things even that happen far away, and even things you don't even know about, but they're just happening, and that creates a form of energy that impacts all of us. And then there's the things we know, which actually also impact us. But I think it goes also deeper than that. And possibly, it's always been like this, in the sense that if you don't really recognize your deeper nature, I'm being very Buddhist here, but that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
But if you don't really ever look inside into what feels uncomfortable, then you keep running from it, and you keep finding ways to sort of cover it up and distract yourself or numb yourself. But what happens, I think, is because things are becoming so impermanent, and you can sense that the world is changing constantly, and I think that aggravates the sense of discomfort and anxiety, I would say. Because thing is, because our mind, what we think our mind is, which means thoughts, emotions, and all these things, is so fleeting. It's constantly changing. We seek reassurance and stability outside. And from previous generations, like our parents, lived in a world where things were more stable, even though they changed. But in general, like, you got a job for your life, You got into a job at 20 or 25, and it would last until you die. Marriages were stable, friends were more stable. There's always been change, but not at this rate. So now, when you don't do your inner work, and you're just trying to relate on external things for security and stability, well, things are not as easy as they used to be. And then there's other factors, of course, but this is just the first thing that came to my mind as you asked.
Yeah. So how do we cultivate that, begin to develop a sort of that inner work? Where do we start?
Well, and as you probably know, but I don't know if the listeners know, the Buddhist method is threefold. Basically, you have, of course, meditation, which is nowadays what most people have become more familiar with. But if you take it off the context, it's not really enough to stabilize yourself, even though it is an essential tool for sure. But the Buddhist method contains two other tools which are equally important, which is ethics, and that means being aware, it's not moral, but it's being aware of the consequences of your actions. And by actions, we mean not just physical actions or behavior, but, words and thoughts. So becoming aware of it and being able to distinguish the ones that bring about harmony and the ones that bring about disharmony, both in yourself and others.
Yeah.
And then there's the view, what we call the view, which is the philosophical practical way of seeing the world. And even though when we say philosophy, people tend to think about something a bit abstract and disconnected from reality, it's just the opposite. Because reality is not something fixed. It's reality. Your reality is not my reality, even though we might be looking at the same thing, because we're looking to it through different patterns. Almost in the literal sense, it's like my glasses are not similar to yours.
Yeah.
And when we look at something, we look through those lenses. And those lenses are made of many different things, including the way you see and you conceive the world. And that's why you can't really achieve that sort of inner stability. I mean, of course, probably you can, but according to the Buddhist teachings, and if you use this method, you need to use the three of them. And you have to ask me something else, because otherwise I will keep talking.
That's okay. I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, of course, this might sound a bit foreign or to someone who has never been introduced to the Buddhist teaching, and it's nothing kind of mysterious or extraordinary. It's about reality, how things work, and in its basic approach, there's a radical change, which is turning inwards for answers instead of turning outwards for answers. And of course, it doesn't mean you become totally introvert and you don't care about anything. But it's more like in order to be active in the world in a way that is efficient and harmonious, you have to make sure that it comes from the right place inside, Because if you're trying to fight anger with anger, it's just more of the same. And eventually at some point you're going to do something that becomes disharmonious. So in the Buddhist way of seeing things, it's more about cultivating the inner quality, like the inner attitude, to fine-tune it, to make sure that it's really something that you're trying to achieve the welfare for everybody, not just for you, or not just for a portion, or not just against someone, but trying to find harmony. And once you make sure of that, and that it comes from a genuine positive wishing place, then you can act. And then you act according to your capacity and your sphere of influence, I would say. If you have influence over 10 people, well, then you do just that. But if you're, I don't know, an influencer or a podcaster and you get influence over a lot of people, well, you do that too, you know? So it's not so much, in the Buddhist view, it's not so much about what you do, but how you do it or from where you do it. And if you're not stable in yourself, and I mean, as much as you can, I'm not saying you have to be perfect, but if you're not stable yourself, then what can you offer?
Yeah.
You know, sometimes from someone who has really, who acts from his center, his or her center, a smile has a lot of power. And if you're not centered, then maybe some grand action might not be that grand after all, you know.
I've definitely got experience of that. I remember one time I was donating at the food bank, and I caught myself lingering there a little bit long so the people could see me donating. And so that was like a form of outer giving, but I was sort of inner taking, right? I wasn't.
Well, it's not that it is immoral, that's
No.
not the thing.
Yeah.
But it's like it sort of has its own defect in the sense that you're expecting something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if it doesn't comply or if you don't get what you're trying to obtain, then you get frustrated or it becomes power struggles or with your fellow or and that's where you understand, when you see these signs, then you understand that you're maybe not completely aligned. And I think it's very noble and certainly very useful and wonderful if you want to have this sort of social engagement in doing things for others. But from the Buddhist point of view, it is also very important to check ourselves constantly. Where is it coming from, you know? And
Yeah.
because the tendency is, because it is so gratifying to feel that you're being useful, then you get addicted to that part and it sort of covers up or, you know, becomes more important than the fact of helping.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be aware of where is it coming from.
Yeah.
And also, on the other hand, for those who cannot do this kind of things or it's not within their sphere or whatever, then there is sometimes this frustration, like if I can't do that, then what can I do, you know? And that's, again, also important when you are in that situation to realize that sometimes just if you know how to smile, just smile, or you know, just be kind to your neighbor or to the person you're sitting next to you in some waiting room or in the plane or whatever, and that might be enough. If that's all you can do, it's already something, you know.
Yeah.
And even if we don't do anything particular, you know, if you're just a good person, if you impact a few people around you, and that spreads, you know, very quickly. It gets to, it's kind of a ripple effect, you know. So I think every little bit is important.
Yeah. So I wonder if we could maybe go into how you actually came across and found the Dharma.
Okay, why not?
Yeah.
Well, that is a long story.
Yeah.
You know, when I was in my teens, like I was 15 or 16 maybe, I suddenly realized that my real question since ever, but I didn't know before, was what's the meaning of all this, you know, living? And it was very difficult for me to accept that living would be just, you know, being born and then growing up and then get married and then have children and then die. It's just like didn't make any sense. So I had this really, it was not, I mean, many teenagers have this kind of things, or not even teenage people have, but for me it was really intense, you know. It was like existential dread. And I couldn't find any answers. And at that time in Portugal, there was no Buddhism. I mean, I'm old, so and then it was like more than 50 years ago.
Yeah.
There was no Buddhism and there was no books of Buddhism, so I couldn't find there. But I didn't even know I was looking. I mean, even if I had books, I wasn't particularly looking for Buddhism. I was just trying to find an answer. But then when I was 19, I sort of left home and went to Brussels. And that's where I came across Buddhism. And I recall the first talk I attended, I can't remember at all what was said, and I probably didn't understand 80% of it. But it was this feeling that, okay, now, until now, I was kind of banging my head against the wall and suddenly realized there's the door there. You know, there was a door that opened on that day. And I didn't know where it led or what it was or anything, but it seemed like viable method or viable way. And it was like love at first sight, kind of, you know, and since then, that's what I've been doing.
Yeah.
And so in the 80s, so when I was 30, I did a 3-year retreat, which allowed me to go deeper into meditation and all the practices and working with the stuff. You know, we all have lots of stuff.
Yeah.
And since then, I mean, then the retreat actually lasted for 4 years because we got behind in the program or whatever. And then a few years later, after I came out, I started teaching. So in the 92, I started teaching. And so that's what I've been doing since then until now.
Yeah. And the 3-year retreat, so I've not done that, but people I speak to have done that. They said that a lot of things come out during that period.
Well,
You're forced to
yes.
be with yourself, aren't you, for a long period?
Exactly. I mean, it's a group retreat. But by group, we don't mean like you're talking to your neighbor constantly. You know, you're all together in a place. If everyone is in his own room. But of course, being mostly silent and not having distractions and meditating and reciting mantras and whatever the practices you're doing steers a lot of things, of course. But the good, and I mean, the difficult part, which is actually very good, is that you have no way to escape.
Okay, yeah.
Because normally, you know, in ordinary life, you go have a drink with your friend, or you sit and watch a Netflix or several. Or you find a way to just deflect. And in retreat, you don't have much opportunity for that. You can't call anyone. You're not going to knock at the door of your neighbor because he's doing something. And so you have to sit with it.
Yeah.
So in a way, it seems like a bit schizophrenic.
Right.
But so it's not for everybody. And I wouldn't recommend if you're unstable or if you don't have the proper following. I mean, like if there is nobody supervising that you trust or things like this. But if you're well enough and if you're stable enough, then it's incredible. Because it's not that you can't do the same kind of work without being in retreat, but it shortens the time substantially because there's nothing else. You're there for that. There's nothing else you're doing. You don't have weekends or whatever. It's just 3 years straight. I think as much, and it's not specifically, I mean, if you're up to it and if you're willing and if it's something you really want to do, it's not more difficult than living. You have days up and days down like everybody else. But at the same time, you're actually doing something that is really helping.
Hmm.
You know?
And there's this notion of joyful diligence, isn't there, in Buddhism?
Well, yeah, but not every day. But
Ah,
yes,
okay.
yeah, I remember some days were hard,
Yeah.
because you can. I mean, it's in the country. It was in the countryside and all of that. But I remember in summer, for instance, some hot days, and you have all these ideas of holidays in the beach that comes to your mind, memories, and you think sometimes you think, I wish I could go for an afternoon or something like that.
Yeah.
You feel like life is happening elsewhere, and but at the same time, and that was the nice part for me, because I went into a retreat. I was living in a Buddhist community at the time, and the idea was you go into retreat so then afterwards you can help others.
Yeah.
And that helped a lot, because if it had been just for me, it would have been harder. But the thought that what I was doing there would later be helpful for others kept me going in many ways. And I think that's typically human, actually.
Yeah.
Things we wouldn't do for ourselves, we gladly do for others, even though most of the days we are very selfish.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when it comes to what matters,
Yeah.
that's the strange part. When it comes to what matters, it's really like that. If you feel like you even have a slightest responsibility over somebody else, you're ready to do things that you wouldn't care to do for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder if we could now get into what matters then a little bit. You mentioned anxiety earlier, and you said that there's a lot of reasons why that, the world seems quite particularly chaotic at the moment, particularly impermanent. My partner, every time I come home, I think the room looks great, but it's rearranged every single time I come back. The furniture's in a different place. So if I'm trying to find my keys, it's like I'm in an escape room. I'm confused. And I feel like I'm often that way about the world as well, that sometimes things are okay, but there's anxiety that still comes up and wants to find things that are not okay even. Do you think, obviously there is reason to be anxious in the world, but what can help us with that? Like, how can we deal with the mind, the way it relates to the world, and anxiety arises from that?
Well, that's a hard question. It's a hard question because I'm not an anxious person.
Okay.
So, I tend to speak from experience. And well, when I say I'm not an anxious person, I think we're all a little bit anxious, of course, but it's a question of degrees. So I suppose when I hear people talking about anxiety, it's not that I'm completely unaware of what it is, but I think I perhaps never felt that degree of anxiety that you're mentioning. But, I think for me, it's about cultivating a sort of inner refuge, not specifically in the Buddhist sense only, but an inner place of quietness and peace.
Yeah.
And being able to, whenever you feel a little overwhelmed by whatever is happening around you, just go inward and find that place. And for me, it has been mostly meditation that has helped with that.
Yeah.
But not just, again, I think understanding, well, that's where the view comes in. If you understand that everything is interdependent and, and you put it into perspective, things like karma, things like interconnectedness, and things like this, it gives you a much broader perspective of things. Things become not so much like the good and the bad guys, or, you see things in a less linear way and more understanding. So you, at the same time, that also allows you to take a little bit of distance. But then there's another thing, and I was thinking this afternoon. I was thinking about this because people tend to, we usually mix. I mean, we don't really distinguish between empathy and compassion, and I think it's different. Because empathy is more like the visceral reaction to suffering or trouble that you see happening outside. But it comes from a sense of, it's like you see that pain in somebody, for instance, and you immediately relate to yourself. So it's a bit, it's almost like a feeling that comes from fear. This could also happen to me. Or you see the news in television, for instance, and you recognize the pain, but you don't just recognize the pain, you immediately project yourself into the situation. You see what I mean?
Yes.
So if you're looking at all the upheaval that is happening in the world from that perspective, then of course you become very anxious. It's normal. But now compassion is different, because compassion is more about what can I do to make it better. So of course, it's not to say that empathy is bad. It's not. And there can't be compassion if there isn't empathy. Because if you can't even recognize people suffering, then there's no compassion that will ever arise. But it's more like seeing it, but don't get sucked into it.
Yes.
And so, for instance, if you're watching the news and you're watching them from empathy, you get sucked into it, and it comes, and the feeling you get is from fear, is projecting yourself into the situation, or imagining someone dear to you in that situation, and you feel horrible. If you're looking at it from compassion point of view, you still recognize the pain, but you don't project yourself into the pain. You assume the stance of somebody who says, okay, I can't do anything about this directly, but what can I do to make the world better? There's a very interesting thing. Years ago, I participated in this study about the effects of meditation on the brain on long-term practitioners.
Yeah.
And one of the exercises we were asked to do is one of those caps that look like bathing caps, with all the electrodes. And they were showing me distressful images of children hungry and things like this. And I was supposed to be meditating on compassion and then evaluating from 0 to 10 how distressful I found. Afterwards, the same study had been done. This study was in France, and I participated there. But the same study had been done in the University of Wisconsin in America. And when they published the results, there was something very interesting about that exercise particularly, because they had this a group of people who were also participating, who hadn't done any meditation or just a little bit of mindfulness, and then the more experienced meditators. And they realized, in analyzing the effects on the brain, they realized that the people who weren't meditating on compassion, weren't familiar with that, reacted much more. Their brain spiked much more than the ones who were meditating on compassion. So I think it tells us something about this. That if you're watching from, or acknowledging from empathy only, then you get burned out. But if you take the stance, if you train into compassion, like recognizing the pain, but not projecting yourself from fear into this situation, but staying more like a kind observer, and more in the stance of what is it that I can do to make this better. Perhaps not the specific situation you're watching, but how can I make this world a better place? Then, not necessarily through heroic actions, but just, even in few small things, then I think you can find much more peace.
Can we do the same thing with internal fear as well? Like, say, for example, you get a stomach ache and then suddenly you look up, you Google it and you're like, oh my God, I'm dying now, and that is often like trying to protect ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah.
How does that relate to can the view help us in that regard?
Well, you can, again, in a case like this, I think there's two things. You have to, of course, know the cause of your pain and treat it.
Yeah.
But with regards to the anxiety that it might create, it's more like trying to do everything you can to solve it, and then just let go, and that seems very easy to say, but maybe not very difficult, not very easy to do.
Yeah.
But it has something to do also with, it's something that maybe you can train, like in many situations in life, whenever we absolutely want things to go in a certain way, just be able to sometimes relax a little bit when things don't go exactly as we wanted, and just be more accepting of things. All of these things. Now, the thing is, the idea of Buddhism is that you train yourself. So you train yourself into compassion. Maybe it won't come the first time. You train yourself into letting go, and probably it won't come, not the first, not the second, not the third. But if you keep trying, and if you keep training, if you keep it in your mind, like, then slowly, trying makes it perfect.
I want to also quickly talk about your podcast, the Empty Cup podcast, and I just listened to the episode this morning on letting go, and it was beautiful. And something that you say in that, they're like short little 13-minute episodes. They're like, is it a short pause? You call it a short pause?
Short pause in the middle of your busy life, or something
and
like
they're really
that.
worth listening to. And the letting go one hit me right at the right time. I was worrying about different things, money, stuff like that. And you said that everything is always changing. Everything is always impermanent already. The way that we think we control things is not necessarily the way that we actually do. And then letting go kind of comes from that. I wonder if we could talk about that a little bit.
Well, yeah. Well, the whole idea started, I mean, that episode, the idea started from this notion that sometimes in life you're stuck in some kind of situation or thought, and it seems like you should let go, but you can't. And then, so what sometimes happens is you let go not out of a decision, but out of weariness, because you have worried so much, you're so tense, you've held to that thing for so long, that at some point you're just too weary to keep holding it.
Yeah.
And I just recorded a Portuguese version of that episode. And I remembered a story that is actually quite good.
Yeah.
I don't know, there was a long time ago, I mean, like really in the 70s, there was this movie called Animals Are Beautiful People by a South African director. And in it, there was this little clip. It's just with animals. Okay, so it's more like almost a National Geographic thing, but a little bit more with a little intrigue, kind of. And there's this part where, this sequence where I think it's, I don't know, in the Kalahari or something like that. There's, of course, very little water. And when there is a problem of drought, they have to turn to the monkeys, because they are the ones who know where hidden water is.
Okay.
But for that, they have to catch them before and make them talk. So they have this thing for ages. The guy goes to a place where there's some trees and the monkeys are in the trees. And so, very obviously, he places something inside a hole in the trunk of a tree. But the hole is very small. And then he goes and hides. Monkeys have seen, so they're very curious, and they start, being around and looking at it, and until one puts his hand inside, grabs whatever is inside, but then cannot take his hand off.
Okay.
Because the moment he closes his fist, the hand doesn't lose, you can't take it out. And he stays stuck. It could go if he just let go, but he doesn't.
He won't. Yeah.
He won't. So then when he's at that stage, the guy comes and catches the monkey, and then of course he's so frightened that he lets go. And I think it's such a good image, because when we think we're stuck in something, we're actually not stuck.
Yeah.
It's just an option, it's because we won't let go of whatever is imprisoning us, even though we might know it's still not easy. But I think I also say in this podcast towards the end, I think it's not about giving up, it's about giving back. Giving back to life what was never ours anyway, because we can't control anything in reality. We might think we can, but we can't. So yes, of course, we should do our best to have things going the best way possible, but with flexibility, and this is again something you have to train in everyday life with small things, so that when big things come up, you're already trained into this idea of you can only do as much as you can, and then everything else you just have to give it back to life to see that it goes the right way. That's why also we insist so much about the attitude.
Yes.
Because if you're doing it from the right place, then you know that you're doing your best, but then you can't control how things are going to occur.
Hello there, just a quick note to let you know that if you're enjoying the Bardo podcast and you'd like to help keep the show going, the best way you can support us is on Patreon, patreon.com/the Bardo podcast. It takes me a lot of time to record, edit, research these conversations, so any financial support really does help me out. And a big thanks to everyone who's helping out already, really does make a difference. Very much appreciate it. There's a link in the show notes, patreon.com/the Bardo podcast. All right, let's get back to the conversation. You mentioned flexibility, having more flexibility and openness to things.
Exactly.
And I think that brings us into the view. How does the view inform that decision, do you think, to be more open? What is the Buddhist view that would lead to that kind of response?
Well, and it's quite we could say it's quite complex in a sense, because it's not that it is complex, but it's actually very profound. It's more like that. But I think in essence is this idea that things are not as solid as they seem, which might not be I can say very something that we're looking forward to, because we think we want things to be very stable,
scary,
and secure.
I think, when
it's a bit scary. It is. And when we talk about impermanence, in general, it's a word that makes us a bit, defensive, I say. But it's because we're not seeing the full picture. Because if things weren't impermanent, then harm also would last forever, So when we are in a painful situation, we are very happy that things pass. So, it goes both ways. So it's not just bad, it's also sometimes very good. But also, I think when you realize things are not just impermanent in the sense of a random impermanence, like they keep changing, but you don't know where they're going. It's also, they are interdependent in the sense that the way you see things is your way. So what you see is an interdependence between your view or your perspective and what is actually happening. So in this sense, then it becomes something different. This flexibility is also gives you also the possibility to change your world or your perception of the world if you change from your end, not necessarily the situations outside. And because it is flexible and because it is interdependent, then when you change, things change. You know, I was reflecting the other day about how patterns, like your pattern and my pattern, when we put two people together, say in a romantic relationship or a close relationship, you come with your patterns and I come with mine.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes some people have such strong patterns that the moment they start interacting with you, they immediately put you in one of their boxes, kind of.
Yeah.
And it's almost like they make you react in a way you have never reacted before because you're reacting to their pattern and vice versa. So what I mean to say is things are so fluid that, you know a part of me or a me that nobody else knows. And this is reciprocal, of course.
Yeah.
So I know a part of you or a version of you that nobody else knows. So this is how fluid things are. And in this sense, when you realize this, we can also take advantage of it. Because then if you want to live in a nice world or in a nice experience, you have the tools for creating a nice experience for yourself. Regardless, not completely regardless, but more independent of the circumstances. So as you started by saying your life is good and you still feel anxiety. Yeah, that was exactly how I felt when I was 15. I remember thinking, I'm not very good at being happy. I have everything, but still I can't find happiness within myself, And then when I started practicing Buddhism, maybe not immediately, but in time, things changed. And the same way you can be unhappy in a life that is many people would envy, you could also be happy in a life that most people would dread. And you see it all the time in the world, So it's this interdependence. It's not just about things interacting with each other or, I don't know, oil not coming right now and then having an impact on the economy or whatever. That's true too, but it goes much deeper. It's how you create your own world and how you influence or sort of create in others a reaction to your own patterns that make that person become someone different when they're with you. Wow. And that can, again, goes both ways, Some people bring the best in us and some people bring the worst. And, and when you understand that, then you know how you start understanding how to protect yourself on one way and also how much impact you can have on others also, both positive and negative, depending on your awareness. And then not just that, but then once you recognize your destructive patterns, then you can change them because everything is fluid.
Yeah.
So you're not stuck into being a certain person for all your life. It can be a very strong conditioning, but it's not definitive. And you can always change it.
Yeah. Talking about destructive patterns, I wonder if we could. Maybe we've touched on this. Maybe I could illustrate it. So, I do comedy, and when I'm doing it, my tendency, even if everyone's laughing, if I'll see one person, there was a lady a couple of months ago. She was looking at her watch, and she was it's going too long. And I was just focusing on that, and everyone else was having a good time. And then like, for the rest of the week, I was like dreaming about that woman. I was like, oh, I can't believe that was like, I took it as an insult to me because I didn't get the approval that I desired, right? And I wonder if we could talk about maybe for performers, how can we have experiences where we want to connect with people, but try to loosen that need for approval a little bit, because that ruins it.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. Let me first say something
Yeah.
about how I appreciate you being so honest.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because most people wouldn't show themselves so vulnerable.
I think it's funny.
No,
be
but I
honest, yeah.
totally understand. And actually, giving teachings, in a way, it might sound really strange saying this, but it's also a performance in a way. You also have an audience, and you're also looking at people. We're all looking at you, and you can see in their faces if they're understanding, if they're not understanding, if they're happy with what you're saying, or if it's really making sense or not. And let me tell you a little, since you've been so candid, let me tell you a little story of something similar that happened to me years ago. I was giving a talk, and actually it was in the South Pacific, and I had just arrived a few hours before, maybe the day before or something. So I had this jet lag, and I was kind of in this fog where you can't really think properly. And there was, I don't know, maybe 30, 40, 50 people in the room. And it was towards the end of the session. It was like almost lunchtime. And someone in the back of the room stand up and left. And this happens all the time because people have commitments or whatever. And normally I don't pay attention.
Yeah.
I don't even notice. But because I was feeling insecure, because I felt like my mind wasn't clear, and I wasn't being able to convey my ideas and things like this, I became insecure, and I felt, oh my God, she's left because, and it was so bad that even for a second or two, I was kind of stuck, like I couldn't say anything. It was so bad. It never happens to me. And so there was this idea in my mind, oh, she isn't liking, or she didn't like what I said.
Yeah.
I felt like you said, very personal, like a personal attack or something. But then there was another voice in my head that said, you're stupid. She probably just went because it's almost lunchtime. We're a bit late and she needs to go and cook lunch or something. And then another voice in myself said, no. She's actually going out to call a friend and say, it's wonderful, you have to come.
Yes.
And by then I was laughing inside, because it is so much about how you see things. And I think, of course, probably my training in Buddhism allowed me to have just even to acknowledge the possibility that what I was feeling about that was just my interpretation. And when you say this to somebody, people immediately say, yes, but what was the truth? But we're not actually so interested in the truth, are we? Because we will never go and ask the lady, why did you go? But we will still assume one of the versions.
Yeah.
I just said three, but there's limited, there's no limit to the possibilities of why the lady stood up and went. And we tend to assume, and what we assume is actually our own conditioning. But if you never realize it is, then you're stuck with automatic patterns that you're never aware of. And sometimes we do even something worse, like imagine that the lady was actually going to call her friend and say, you have to come in the afternoon because this is really great. And because I was feeling so insecure, I would call her out and say, oh, don't you know that it's rude to go out in the middle of something?
Yeah.
And because she would feel threatened or, attacked or something. She
Yeah.
would possibly respond something unpleasant.
Yeah.
And what would I think? I was right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we create our reality by the way we react to the assumptions we make.
Yeah.
And not only that, but then if something like that had happened, I'm not that kind of person. I would never do that. But if I did, if that kind of thing happened, then the next time somebody would stand up and go out, there wouldn't even be a doubt in my mind,
Yeah.
that why she's doing that. So we create our own world, you see?
Yeah.
So I think you have no idea why the lady was looking at her watch. Maybe her daughter was having a baby,
Yeah.
or maybe she had an appointment of some kind.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's necessarily about you or about not wanting to be there or something like that. It can be anything. So it is the assumptions, and it's because we're feeling insecure.
Yeah.
We are always feeling insecure. It's just about degrees, Nobody is totally confident because there's always this sense of something is not perfect or not fully present or not entirely complete. So we're always trying to reassure ourselves. That's the problem with life.
Yeah.
That's why we do all we do, It's either obtaining something, so it reaffirms our sense of self, or getting rid of something that seems to be a threat to our sense of self. And that we keep doing, these are our two modes. Either I want, either I don't want. And both strategies are just a way of reinforcing our sense of self. So the more we sort of relax around this sense of self, the less things look like a threat. And even if they do, if you have a little sense of humor, which you should because you're a comedian, then you can play around with it and say, okay, no, she has a new watch, actually. She just bought a new Apple Watch and she is so proud of it. So can be anything, you'll never know. I know that because of our conditioning, in the sense that because what we are used to think about things, things appear to us in a way, and we don't think there could be any other way to interpret them. But that's not true. It's just because we are looking at them through our lenses. Somebody else might see a completely different reality, might not even had realized that the person was looking at her watch.
Yeah. So with this, you said a minute ago about relaxing around this sense of self. Because there seems to be, you're describing like a sense of unease at all times. You said that we're always insecure.
We're always insecure, yeah.
Some people, sometimes you may hear things like, we need to get rid of our ego, stuff like that. I think you're talking about something quite different. You're not saying we need to get rid of our ego like that, because I feel that's an object as well that you're creating.
Yeah, we don't need to get rid of our ego. We need to use it. But what we can't allow is for the ego to be the master, kind of. And by ego, it's also a tricky word because it's not the ego of the psychology. Buddhist ego is the attachment of the self and everything, and the need to be constantly reassuring that we do exist in a separate way. It's more like that. That's why these two impulses of wanting and not wanting are the core of the strategies of reassuring oneself and reaffirming our identity over and over and over and over again, Like I often use the example of teenagers and how they absolutely want to resemble to the ones they want to resemble to, and absolutely want to not resemble to adults or other groups or whatever. And that's how they build their identity, because being a teenager is difficult. It's one of the identity crises of our lives, is affirming your identity, creating an identity. So, you want to copy the influencer that does this or does that. So you will use the exact same clothes, you say the exact same words, so here you have the instinct of what you want, how you want to present yourself, not just to others, but the image you want to create of yourself for your own usage, kind of, And then, by the same measure, you also want to deflect, kind of react against everything that you don't want to be. But even though it's negative, it's still in the way to define yourself. You define yourself both by what you want and by what you don't want to become or to be seen as. And this is most intense at when you're in your teens, because that's when you're building an identity. As a child, you don't have that sort of layer of look into yourself. Of course, you exist. This toy is yours, but you don't have an opinion about yourself. That starts with adolescence. But then it goes on entire life. And if for different reasons you're a more secure or more insecure person, then more insecure people will constantly need reassurance. And not just from others, from everything, the things you own, the things you want, even brands.
Yeah.
It becomes an identity enhancer, kind of.
Yeah.
And but that doesn't mean only objects, opinions, social status, titles, occupations, careers, even very abstract things can become, identity enhancers. And consuming companies and things like this know that very well. The price you pay for iPhone, for instance, it's not the real price. It's the price you're willing to pay for the enhancement of identity of having an iPhone, because it's prestigious or something like that. I'm just an example, but I also have an iPhone.
So how can we then, you said, so we were talking about identity enhancers, but how can you said we need to use the ego to relax the sense of self.
Yeah. Well, we need to relax about the need to reassure ourselves constantly.
Okay.
But then, of course, living so you can even get to a point like the teachers or people who are, spiritually more realized, they don't feel the need to reassure themselves in this way. So they relax a lot around this idea of self, which means that if somebody criticizes them or something goes wrong or people have bad opinion of you or whatever, it doesn't touch them in the same way. But we live in a society where everyone acts from the ego, so you can't just be a saint, kind of, like totally a person who is completely egoless.
Yeah.
You have to show for yourself, you have to put limits to what others, you can't let other people walk all over you, for instance, because you don't have an ego. You have to still have a personality. You will have a personality because despite not being self-centered, you still have things that are part of who you are, like this body and things like that. But instead of being this sort of dysfunctional need of constant reassurance and enhancement, it's just like a cloth, like clothes that you wear.
Okay.
So that you wouldn't go naked on the street, even if you have realized that you don't need clothes.
Yeah.
So you wear your clothes in social interaction. You wear your personality in social interaction, because otherwise people wouldn't know how to connect with you if you didn't have any characteristic or anything like that. So it's part of being human, but it doesn't dictate your life.
Yeah.
If this makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it can also, that identity enhancers can co-opt anything, I think.
Anything.
And Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche wrote a really good book, Cutting Through Spiritual
Yeah.
Materialism.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first started practicing and getting interested in Buddhism, I was recently sober, and I would tell everyone about it all the time. Like, it was a bit of like a thing. And now, because I'm doing stuff publicly and saying I practice Buddhism, now I'm almost scared, because I think people are going to come with a lot of assumptions. And I'm an idiot a lot of the time, and I make mistakes, and they might see me in public grumpy on the train, or stuffing my face with like cookies or something, and be like, well, he's not a very good Buddhist, you know. So how do we avoid our spiritual sort of practice becoming another ego enhancer as well?
That's a very good question. But it's not just what, I mean, part of it is what you're saying, but even without trying to perform anything for others, it's just for us, ourselves. Now, you find yourself very spiritual because you're sitting with your prayers in, or whatever. You find yourself superior to, to other people who don't have a spiritual path or any. So it's just a matter of being aware, basically.
Yeah.
That's why you can never say now it's done. Now I have it figured. It's not like that, because this tendency is so ingrained and so old that even if during meditation, for instance, you can have these glimpses of relaxation where it seems like this sense of self is kind of thinning. If once you're out of your meditation and you go out and about and somebody says something, it's almost like regroups again.
Yeah.
And you're out there ready to fight or something like this. I love this expression. They say that because there's different levels of conditioning, and there's one that's called the habitual tendencies, and it's kind of the subtlest part of all this thing. And the example they give, it's like the scent that remains in the flask of perfume after it being empty. And I think it's an excellent example, because even if you realize that this the sense of self is actually empty awareness, empty in the sense free and spacious, and there's nothing solid there, the scent still remains for a long time. So when you're not in that experience, and even if you had that experience 5 minutes ago and somebody says something that vaguely sounds like a critic, you will just immediately, everything will sort of solidify again in your. But of course, it will not be exact same thing as it was before, like in 20 years ago, or even a few months ago, perhaps. So, it is progressive. It won't disappear all at once. It's going to take time, and it's like, slowly getting to a broader vision, slowly getting to something more integrated, more relaxed. And it's not something it's not a race, it's a marathon. You really have to take your time. It's not a sprint.
Yeah. And thinking about that, the marathon is making me think about, so a lot of people who watch this and listen to this are interested in activism and social issues, and one of the things that happens in that world is burnout. When we, because it's people who care deeply about things, And there's a lot of injustice in the world.
Oh, yeah.
And so how do we respond to that without burning out, one? And also, some people think that anger is a mobilizing force. I think that anger is quite destructive. But so how do we respond by not burning out? Is my first part of the question. Second part of the question is, how do we respond to injustice without losing ourselves in that as well?
Yeah, but it's a thin line, I think. Well, for the first part of your question, the burnout,
Yes.
it's the difference between empathy and compassion that I pointed in a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
And the first time I heard about this difference was actually Mathieu Ricard, is this French monk. He's quite well known.
Yeah.
He was talking about the practice of compassion that was implemented in a hospital where nurses were constantly in burnout. If you're in certain services, in certain hospitals, especially with heavy cases of, cancer or whatever it is, they are exposed to so much suffering that if you approach that from empathy, then you get burned out, because it's naturally, the thing is, we react to suffering by aversion. You don't want to suffer. So if you take other people's suffering as yours, you're constantly in the reaction mode.
Yeah.
You're constantly reacting against it. And that's exactly the same thing that happens with activists in a way. You see, you're so sensitive to injustice. You're so sensitive to everything that is going wrong in the world. It took it upon yourself, and you start reacting with aversion, like not wanting.
Yeah.
The response, once they introduced in the hospital the meditation on compassion, the rate of the burnout diminished enormously. They were not just able to cope with the exposure to the suffering, but they were also living better lives. You see, so I think it's a subtle difference, but it's a very important one. Because if you really stop to think, if I'm going to, I don't know, go into a demonstration and break a few glasses or something like this, will that make it a better world? Or maybe if I do something else, more pacific, or more peaceful, will it make a more difference? Or will it not feed the chain of action and reaction into, of anger and conflict and things like this? It's very difficult.
Yeah.
It's not easy. But if we analyze properly, we have to really see does it come from anger, does it come from fear, or is it coming from a genuine desire, not just genuine, but also wise desire of making something that does make things better.
Yeah.
So I think burnout comes from the aversion part, because aversion is a very destructive feeling. It's very draining. When you're even if you are in a situation like, say, for instance, if you're stuck in a traffic jam, you don't want to be there. So even the moment you get home, you feel completely exhausted, not from the traffic jam, but from not wanting to be in it.
Yeah.
So if you do all these actions from a place of anger and reaction, of negative reaction, like I don't want this, then you get drained. But if you do it from a place of thinking what would be the best course of action to make it better, if there is something you can do, then I think it gives a very different feeling. And because when you do something that is actually really positive, you feel gratification. So it fills you with lots of positive chemicals,
Yeah.
and that's something very sustainable in the
Yeah.
long run.
I actually saw a study that said compassion, its rejuvenating effect on the
Exactly,
brain.
exactly. Yeah. And
But
there was a second part of your question.
well, I think I think a lot of people feel powerless
Yeah,
and outraged, and some of that is fed by like what we could consider, social media
yeah,
perhaps encourages outrage.
of course.
However, when you have leaders of the world engaged in nefarious activities, starting wars, I think it's understandable that people are
Oh yeah.
outraged. And what do we do with that sense of powerlessness?
Well, I don't know. I can tell you how I feel
Yeah,
about
sure.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel, of course, it is not only just understandable that
Yeah.
you feel a bit outraged about things that happen, which they seem so outrageous,
Yeah.
but it would be like strange if you didn't feel anything
Yeah,
about
yeah,
that.
it would,
It wouldn't be a good sign, I
Yeah.
would say. But what happens with me is, if you understand more deeply, you understand that the decisions they're taking or whatever is happening is not different from how we sometimes feel. It's just a different scale. You know, if they can push a button and drop a bomb over a city, but we can slam the door in the face of somebody or punch him in the face because we didn't like something he said, or we don't like his face or something like that. So it's just a different scale, but it's still the same problem. It's still these negative emotions that take over and blind us completely. And then we can do things that we wouldn't even think we could if we are blinded by hatred or anger or jealousy or whatever. So what it makes me think is, this will go forever if people don't change from inside. So it makes me feel like I'm at the right place, I'm doing the right thing. If I want to help the world, the best course of action is to start to change myself.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, and if people around you see that you take a different stance, that you're a more serene person, that you can be joyful without having specifically a reason for it, like then it might give them the idea that maybe they can also become like that, and one by one, that doesn't mean you don't do anything, but whatever you do from that place, so when I see things like this, either in reality or even watching a movie, and sometimes it's so appalling what you're watching because it's fiction, but it could be reality, because in reality people also do these things. My guideline is, until when I can watch this with compassion. And when I see I'm getting sucked into anger or, feeling that this guy should die, or then I realize that this is, either I can change my mindset over it, or then I just turn off and go do something else, walk or hear the birds or do something, because it doesn't help. That's the thing, because what is, if you see it from more like an energetic point of view, what media does, whether it's the conventional media or social media, is trigger that. And the only reason they do that is because that's why people see it. That's what attracts. If you talk to the fear, then you have a response. If you say something very nice, maybe you won't have that massive response. It's just a business.
It is, yeah.
And I'm sure you know that YouTube, what they say, the click buy.
You need to create a problem, basically.
Exactly. Like if you say something that instills fear in people, they will click. And if it's not, then they won't have. Some people will click because not everyone is driven by that. But so it's a process. But if you're in a state of rage, you're not very different from the rage that is it's not that you're not very different. It's that you're not in a very different state of mind than the state of mind of those who are doing these things. Or at least you are in something that if it's of similar nature, not necessarily morally equivalent, but of same nature. So I think the best thing the only thing that can counterbalance that imbalance is remaining calm and remaining compassionate and understanding that this is just another level it's another scale of trouble and disagreement and all these negative emotions, but they're all over. You can see it all the time in the families or in yourself, in others. So it's not that you can't do anything, but what you have to do starts with yourself.
Yes.
That's the idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
And with social media, another problem that comes with it that I've noticed in myself recently. So I was editing a podcast and I noticed every time I laughed, I would look down and then I saw, oh, my hair's thinning here. So then I started researching hair loss pills. And so you wrote a book on aging. And I wonder if, because it feels like there's this guy now called Brian Johnson, I don't know if you've heard of him, he wants to live forever and he's doing all of these, like he follows this strict regime so he can look great and live longer, and it feels like we can't just decay anymore. We have to aging is a sort of taboo in some ways.
Yeah, it is.
How can we learn to age great? Is there anything, can we find liberation in aging?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I find it so liberating.
Okay.
I was just talking in the car, not with Cesare, because I mean with some friends.
Yeah.
And I was talking and saying, the fact that I'm old now, and I know that even if I'm going to live another 10 years, but it's like I'm on the timeline, It has liberated me from this constant feeling that what is coming next. We don't actually live in the moment. We are living for the next moment.
It's true.
But by the time the next moment arrives, it's the present. So we are already living for the next one after that. And very recently, actually, the first episode of my podcast is called This Is It. Because it was a moment recently, not long ago, where I had this feeling that for perhaps one of the first times in my life, I wasn't looking forward to anything.
Okay.
Not in the understand me. It's not like a hopeless feeling at all. It's just being contented with what is. Now, this is it. I mean, this is what is at this moment. I don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. I'm open to it and might be wonderful. But I'm not living this moment looking forward to what is going to be tomorrow, or more accurately, I'm not living this moment because I'm waiting for the next one.
Yeah.
You understand what I mean?
Big time, yeah.
So actually, knowing that I don't have that much more years to live, gave me this sense of why should I be making projects for in 2 years, for instance? I have no idea if I will still be here. I can do these projects, but not transforming the present moment in the sort of waiting room where you're waiting for something really special.
Yeah.
That is not the present moment, but something in the future or something like this. Now, the danger of getting old is that you may be aware that you don't have that much future, but you have a lot of past.
Okay.
So you also have to be able to get, to let go of that, to make peace with whatever happened, to forgive whoever you need to forgive yourself, to, let go of resentments of the things you wanted to do and didn't do, and the things you didn't want to do and did, and all of that stuff, because it's done. and that's exactly what made you who you are right now. So it wasn't all that bad. But also what I think, I mean, of course, if you have a very tight sense of identity linked with the body, for instance, then yes, getting old might be very painful because, you remember when you were thinner, when you were fitter, when you were handsomer, whatever it is, and you're not any of that now. But maybe that is not the most important thing.
Yeah.
And that's what I think aging teaches us, is that if you keep smiling and if your smile is genuine, people will like you anyway, even if you're bald, even if you're fat, even if you have wrinkles, if you have toothless. I mean, whatever you are and how you are, it will still be, you still be a person and you can be lovable. And people might still want to be around you because you're joyful and you have a lot of experience and you have a lot of sense of humor and you, yeah. And I think not just others will love you, you will love yourself. That's the most important part, incidentally, because if you love yourself, others will love you. Because you're kind of self-sufficient. I know this may sound strange, but if you're not self-sufficient emotionally, like you will always be needy. And God, we know how we don't like needy people, And as you age is very important also. You take things with grace, kind of, yeah, sure, my knee is bothering me or my hip is this, but you can laugh of yourself and then makes it all very much more light. Personally, I wouldn't want to live forever. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be so boring to be Tsering for eternity. I don't want that. God, no. Variety is so nice. But of course, as a Buddhist, I believe we have several lifetimes. So, even if, I mean, not that I'm looking forward to, but once this lifetime is finished, there will be another one, and I'm fine with that.
Well, at the start of the podcast, I sort of asked what matters, and I think we've come full circle, and that's a nice place to sort of finish. And so we mentioned that you've got your podcast as well, the Empty Cup podcast. And where can we find out more information about you as well?
Well, there's my website,
Yep.
tseringpaldron.com. And there you'll find, but also I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. Basically, that's the two things. I'm not on X, and I have an account, but I never post anything there. But also, through my website you have access. But also the podcast is on Instagram. Sorry, Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any other service of podcasts. You can find it there. And the idea, if you allow me to explain, the idea of the name, the empty cup, is the idea of, it's just a brief pause. It's like 15 minutes while we observe or we reflect about things, but we try to not come with assumptions and just be more open to look at things from a different perspective. So the idea of the empty cup is like that. Don't bring your cup full, because then there's nothing that can get in anymore. There's no space for anything new. So that's the idea. But going back to what really matters, I think that was one of the questions I asked myself when I started writing my book, that my Portuguese publisher wanted me to write. And it's interesting when you arrive at an older age and you look back at your life and you try to find out what was it that really mattered to me. Of course, it might be different for everyone, but I think human relations is a very important thing.
Mm.
And at the end of the day, it's not how much money you have made in your life, it's how much real connections you had. And by real connections, it's not necessarily the people that stayed in your life for a long time. It can also be the small interactions, but they were very real, authentic, and genuine, sincere, and human with other people. It can be somebody you met only for a few hours even, but there was this genuine exchange. And you will remember that when you get older. The feeling, I think what really strikes us the most is the feeling that you actually did something that helped somebody at some point, even if it was a very small thing. Because we live through, it may sound paradoxical in a sense that we've been talking about developing this inner sense of haven or in a sense of refuge. So it seems like it's very self-centered. But in another way, we are made of encounters. We are made of the people we have met. And we are this sort of crossing lines of all of that. And there's this very unsubstantial point in space where all of those things meet for some time. And that's where we are. That's what we are, is this moment, at this moment. And it's made of moments. But I think it's the fact that you sense that somehow you did things that helped others or made a difference in their lives. And the thing is, probably they won't come and tell you. So you just have, and sometimes they do, but not necessarily. So you just have to be confident in yourself that you did it from the right place. Now, where it landed, you don't know. You don't always know. But you're sure that you did it. You meant well when you did it. And that's what matters, I think, in the end.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to share this moment in space-time intersecting with you right now.
Me too. It was wonderful.
So much. Yeah, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think it's, you doing a podcast, for instance, it's what I was meaning by every little thing counts.
Yeah.
You can do this, so you do it. And if it brightens the morning of someone, or if it gives them an idea of something they can change, or it's already something. And that, it's a ripple. So I think what we have to think of, it's not about, I cannot do anything about the war. Sure, probably not. But you can do so many other things to make others smile and be more joyful.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do, because that we can do. We don't have to linger on things we can't do. We have to be more like focus on what we can do. Yeah. And I think this is it.
This is it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a lovely conversation. I enjoyed it.
That's it for this week's podcast. Huge thanks to Tsering for such a lovely and thoughtful conversation. You can find out more about Tsering and links to her books and her podcast, The Empty Cup, on tseringpaldron.com. There'll be a link in the show notes. I do recommend The Empty Cup. It's a lovely small pause from the day. Please do subscribe, share the podcast, leave a review. If you think someone would enjoy it, do send it, share it. It genuinely does help. Comment on YouTube. And if you'd like to support us financially, you can do so at patreon.com/The Bardo Podcast. You can also find out about comedy, meditation, groups, everything else I'm up to at my website, marcsalmoncomedy.com. So, we'll see you next time in the in-between. Have a good one.